So right now, as we're sitting here in April 2026, there are millions of brilliant, highly educated people staring at their
Oh,
laptops.
absolutely. Millions.
And they're just, clicking easy apply on all these job boards, and they honestly think they are grinding incredibly hard.
Right. It feels like work.
Yeah, but what if I told you that sending out 100 resumes a week isn't actually hard work at all? What if it's like a highly sophisticated psychological defense mechanism that's basically just designed to avoid real effort?
I mean, it is a completely controversial premise, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at the source text for today's deep dive, the notes on the good and bad strategy life lesson, the author makes this really compelling, honestly, a pretty brutal argument.
Brutal is the right word for it.
Yeah. The busyness of online applications is just an illusion of progress. And if you, the listener, are relying on it, you're likely trapped in what they call this cycle of GAD strategy.
And that is exactly why we are diving into these notes today. Because look, if you are listening to this, you probably fit the profile of what we like to call the learner.
Oh, the classic learner.
Right. You love gathering data, you read the articles, you listen to the deep dives, you take the notes. But the dark side of being a learner is that it is incredibly easy to get trapped in this endless loop of preparation.
Yeah, you research and you strategize, but
Yeah.
you just you struggle to actually pull the trigger.
Exactly. So our mission today is to take the framework from these notes and show you how to break that inertia. We are going to map out exactly how to translate all that knowledge you've been hoarding into actual, unstoppable career and life momentum.
Which is so needed right now. Because the defining characteristic of a good strategist, at least according to the text, is the ability to look at a failing approach, acknowledge the reality of that failure, and just stop repeating it.
Stop doing the thing that isn't working.
Yes. The author points out that sitting around in 2026, assuming your degree alone is going to just automatically open doors.
Or waiting for the macro economy to shift.
Exactly, waiting for the interest rates to drop or whatever. It's a completely failed experiment. You have to stop.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. If clicking apply is just this psychological shield, what does taking the armor off actually look like, say, on a random Tuesday morning? Because before we can build real momentum, the notes say we have to clearly define this bad strategy that's causing us to stall out. So, how does the author actually define it?
Well, fundamentally, a bad strategy is really just a statement of desire dressed up as a plan.
Wait, a statement of desire. Give me an example.
So the author notes that saying, I need a job or I want to start a career, that's just a hope. It is not a strategy.
Ah,
And the text outlines a few really common traps here, like we wait for a sudden burst of motivation to save us, or we become overly vague. We tell ourselves, and when we tell hiring managers, honestly, anything is fine. I'm a quick learner. I'll take any job.
okay, but wait. I want to play devil's advocate on that specific point for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't casting a wide net just like basic probability? I mean, if I restrict myself to one highly specific niche, aren't I artificially shrinking my odds of getting hired? It feels like telling people anything is fine makes you this flexible, highly attractive candidate.
I get why it feels that way, totally. But the author argues the exact opposite is true.
Really?
Yeah. When you tell the market, I can do anything, what the market actually hears is, I am not particularly good at anything.
Oh, wow. Ouch.
Right. You just become completely invisible to a hiring manager who is looking to solve one very specific problem. Clarity always beats a wide net.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
But the text digs even deeper into the psychology of why we prefer the wide net. Like,
Yeah.
why do we love the endless online applications? It's because a real targeted strategy requires you to face direct rejection.
And direct rejection feels absolutely terrible.
Exactly. It hurts.
I can completely relate to this. I remember a few years ago when I was trying to launch this creative side project. And instead of actually reaching out to potential collaborators, which, by the way, terrified me, I spent literally 3 weeks researching and categorizing different productivity software to manage my hypothetical tasks.
Oh, the classic Notion board trap.
Yes, color coding, everything. And I felt incredibly busy. But looking back, it was just pure productive procrastination I was hiding.
That is the exact mechanism the author is talking about. Starting small or maybe taking a role that feels beneath your educational level. It actively hurts our pride. The quote-unquote hard work of clicking apply or organizing your desktop folders, that's emotionally safe.
Right.
You are trading effectiveness for comfort.
Yeah.
And the author argues that if you really want to break this cycle, the new baseline rule has to be, you must choose the discomfort daily.
So choosing discomfort means what, practically?
Reaching out directly to a human being, asking for a small opportunity, or accepting a totally unglamorous entry-level role. Those are the uncomfortable actions that actually move the needle.
Okay, so if we accept that premise, right, and we strip away the comfort of hiding behind job boards and color-coded spreadsheets, we are basically left staring at a blank slate. We know what not to do. So how does the source material suggest we construct a good strategy to actually restart the engine?
Well, the author introduces this framework they call the kernel of good strategy, and it consists of 3 sequential parts. You have diagnosis, guiding policy, and actions.
Diagnosis, guiding policy, action.
Yeah, and you cannot skip or reorder these. So first is the diagnosis. This requires stripping away all of your ego.
Which is the hardest part?
Oh, by far. An honest diagnosis, according to the text, sounds something like, I have absolutely no practical industry experience, my resume is way too academic, and my professional positioning is entirely unclear.
Wow, that's harsh. But I guess it identifies the actual illness rather than just treating the symptoms, right?
Exactly.
So once I have that brutal diagnosis, what structurally is a guiding policy? Because honestly, that sounds a little bit like corporate jargon to me. How is that different from just having a goal?
That is a really crucial distinction, actually. A goal is just, I want to work in tech. A guiding policy is the overarching philosophical approach you're going to take to overcome the specific obstacles you just identified in your diagnosis.
Okay, give me an example.
So a guiding policy might be, because I lack formal experience, I will bypass traditional application portals completely, and I will choose to build credibility by offering to do short, specific freelance projects directly for startup founders.
Ah, I see. So it gives you like a rule of thumb for making everyday decisions.
Exactly. It dictates the how. And then the third part, the actions. Those are just the little boots on the ground to execute that policy.
Like the actual emails you send or the specific software you sit down to learn.
Precisely. But the text introduces a really vital concept right here regarding where you should direct those actions. It's called the chain link system.
Okay, chain link system.
The premise is that a system is only as strong as its absolute weakest link.
You know, to explain this, I actually want to move away from the typical chain metaphor for a second.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think of it like a massive traffic bottleneck on a highway. It doesn't matter if you have 5 beautiful, newly paved lanes of highway, and let's say those lanes represent your great university degree, your amazing work ethic, your technical skills.
Right, all the good stuff.
Right. But if there is a massive crash at the exit ramp that narrows everything down to one single lane, let's say that crash is your crippling interview anxiety, the traffic still stops completely.
Yep.
You don't build more lanes to fix the traffic, you have to clear the crash.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. Your career momentum is that highway. And if you are stuck, the author argues you cannot just indiscriminately work harder or build more lanes.
You can't just get another master's degree.
No, you have to run targeted diagnostics. You have to ask yourself, what is the specific crash on my exit ramp?
So how does the text suggest we actually figure that out? Because I imagine a lot of people listening feel like their entire highway is just constantly under construction.
Well, you have to look at the drop-off points in your feedback loop. For example, if you send out 100 direct messages and you get 0 replies, your communication or your resume is the weak link.
Right.
But if your resume gets you in the room, but you never ever get a second interview, then your interpersonal skills or your ability to articulate your value is the weak link.
That makes sense.
You cannot fix everything at once because that just leads to paralysis.
Yeah.
You must find the singular weakest link and fix it first.
I mean, this is incredibly empowering because it totally turns rejection into data. But I think it also leads us to a massive practical problem here.
Which is?
If I am the learner listening to this, right, and I realize, okay, my weak link is my technical skills, my immediate instinct is to look at the calendar and think, okay, I need to spend the next 2 years going back to school to fix my life.
Right.
That the scale of the timeline just becomes completely overwhelming.
Yes. And the author anticipated this exact form of paralysis. To cure that timeline overwhelm, the notes introduced this concept of proximate objectives.
Proximate objectives.
Right. A proximate objective is something that is close enough to be achievable in the immediate future. The author insists we absolutely must stop thinking in years and start thinking in weeks.
So instead of saying, I need to become a senior executive, which doesn't actually tell me what to do when I wake up tomorrow morning, what does a proximate objective look like in actual practice?
It sounds more like I'm going to secure one conversation with an industry professional in the next 7 days. Or I'm going to learn the basics of this one specific database software by Friday.
Oh, that's way more manageable.
In fact, the source material provides a very rigid design blueprint for this. It breaks momentum building into a structured 3-week sprint.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Let's break down the mechanics of that sprint, because
Yeah.
this is where the theory hits the pavement. What is happening in week 1?
Week 1 is purely about your base layer. This is skill acquisition and positioning. So you are identifying the single software tool, the single certification, or just the single piece of industry jargon you need to learn.
Okay.
And then you are fixing your resume to reflect that targeted direction. Note, you are not applying to jobs in week 1.
Now, wait, as someone who naturally loves learning, I have to push back on this.
Okay.
If I have a whole week dedicated to skill acquisition, why wouldn't I take like 5 different rapid online courses? I mean, if I want to get into the corporate world, shouldn't I learn basic coding and digital marketing and project management just in case?
Yeah.
Having a wider safety net feels responsible, doesn't it?
I get that, but the text is explicitly firm on this.
Yeah,
Doing everything is a trap.
really.
You cannot rebuild your professional foundation in 5 different directions simultaneously. The physics of time and energy just do not allow for it. The author aggressively advocates for radical focus.
Radical focus.
If you spread your energy across 5 domains, you move 1 inch in 5 directions. But if you put all your energy into one domain, you move 5 miles down one single path.
Okay, so if I want to break into IT, I don't study business administration and graphic design on the side. I just pick IT. And even narrower than that, I pick one entry path, like say help desk support, and I put all my chips on that number.
Yes, exactly. Speed comes from that radical, almost uncomfortable level of focus.
Got it.
So once you have that base layer set in week 1, week 2 is dedicated entirely to outreach and targeted applications.
Okay, but how does the author suggest doing this outreach without just becoming, a spammer? Because reaching out to strangers is the exact discomfort we talked about avoiding earlier. What are the actual mechanics of week 2?
The mechanism is highly targeted, low friction communication. The author's just directly contacting 5 to 10 specific people a week.
Just 5 to 10?
Yes. And you do not send them your resume and beg for a job.
Okay, good.
You send a brief message stating you are transitioning into their field. You say you admire a specific project they worked on, and you just ask for 10 minutes of their time to ask 2 specific questions about their industry journey.
That's it.
That's it. It is entirely about building micro connections.
And then I assume week 3 is navigating those conversations, managing any interviews that arise from the applications, and just executing really diligent follow-ups.
Exactly.
So you are designing your weeks intentionally rather than just waking up and hoping the universe provides.
Yes. And here is where the author really drops the hammer regarding the illusion of preparation. You complete this 3-week sprint, not to land your absolute dream job, but just to get on the board. The text argues that real professional growth only happens after you start working.
Okay, expand on that, because I think a lot of our listeners feel like they need to be fully baked, perfectly prepared professionals before they even step foot in an office. Like they need to know everything on day 1.
It is a massive misconception. You simply cannot simulate the real-world pressure of a blown deadline, or the nuanced office dynamics of dealing with a difficult manager, or the practical problem solving required in a real business environment just by taking an online course.
Right. You can't learn office politics on YouTube.
Exactly. So do not wait for the perfect salary or the perfect title. Your first role is not your final destination. It is a laboratory.
I love that. A laboratory.
Getting in the door is the proximate objective. Optimizing your career comes much, much later.
That is incredibly liberating. You don't have to have a 10-year plan figured out. You just have to figure out the next 3 weeks.
Yes.
But okay, we have to address the elephant in the room here. We now have the framework, we have the radical focus, and the timeline. What happens if the listener turns off this audio, thinks to themselves, wow, that was a really solid framework, and then just goes right back to doing absolutely nothing?
Well, this is where the notes pivot into what we could call the psychological physics of time. The author discusses the concepts of inertia and entropy. See, we tend to think of time as a neutral canvas that we just sort of exist on. But the text argues that time is actively working against you if you stay still.
Like a literal physical force pushing you backward.
Literally like a physical force. Entropy is the gradual decline into disorder, right? Well, in the context of your career, staying still is how entropy wins.
Oh, wow.
The longer you wait to take action, the heavier the inertia becomes. It becomes physically harder to start. Your confidence organically drops over time.
And the gap on your resume widens.
Exactly, making the narrative harder to explain to employers. And the story you tell yourself about your own capabilities becomes increasingly negative the longer you sit there.
So action is the antidote to decay.
Yes. Imperfect small action is the only force that reverses entropy.
I really love the conceptual physics of that. But let's bring it back down to the ground level, because here is the real friction point. I can hear the listener right now saying, look, it's great to talk about reversing entropy, but I have no experience. I'm starting for zero. I have literally no leverage to take action with. I mean, if I'm going up against a candidate with 10 years of experience, why would anyone take a chance on me?
It's a fair question, but the source material deeply challenges our traditional definition of leverage.
How so?
We assume leverage is a fancy job title, or having a recognizable company on your resume. But the author argues that even without a single day of formal industry experience, a candidate has immense leverage if they just know how to identify it.
What does that hidden leverage actually look like?
It looks like time. It looks like the baseline education that proves you can complete complex multi-year tasks. It's the raw ability to learn quickly, maturity, discipline, and crucially, flexibility.
Okay, I have to push back there. How is flexibility actual leverage against a 10-year veteran? If I'm a hiring manager, why do I care about a 22-year-old's flexibility when I can just hire a 35-year-old who already knows the exact software inside and out?
Because the 35-year-old veteran has constraints.
Ah.
They likely require a $90,000 salary. They might have a mortgage. They want a senior title. And they will absolutely refuse to do the administrative grunt work required to clean up the department's massive backlog.
That's true.
But the younger or less experienced candidate can walk in and say, look, I will take a 3-month contract at an entry-level rate. I will learn your proprietary software on my own time this weekend, and I will clear out your backlog by Friday.
Oh, you solve the immediate headache for way less risk.
Exactly. The veteran won't touch that messy work. Your leverage isn't your past experience. Your leverage is your current lack of constraints. Your power is your willingness to deploy your discipline and flexibility to solve a messy problem right now.
But so many candidates possess these raw traits and simply fail to deploy them.
Because they are waiting for a clean, formal job description to apply to.
Right. Okay, so what does this all mean? If we synthesize everything the author is arguing here, the diagnosis, the weak links, the proximate objectives, and this whole battle against entropy, how do we distill this into an ultimate formula that our listener can actually write down and execute today?
The synthesis of all these strategies from the text boils down to a very unvarnished, almost aggressive formula for momentum.
Let's hear it.
Step 1. Face reality honestly. Diagnose your actual weak link without protecting your ego. Step 2. Choose a clear, singular direction. Not 5 entry paths, just one.
Radical focus.
Right. Step 3. Take daily uncomfortable action.
Specifically, the 5 to 10 direct human-to-human contacts a week.
Yes. And step 4 is the most critical part of all. You must relentlessly utilize the feedback loop.
Meaning?
You treat rejection as data, not as a personal attack. If you send 20 messages and get absolute silence, the data is telling you your messaging or your resume is the weak link. You'd adapt fast.
And if you get interviews but no offers, your verbal communication is the weak link.
Exactly. You use the feedback from the market to systematically forge the paper links in your chain into iron.
Which really leads us to the final, ultimate truth presented in the source material. The thing that is currently holding you back is not your age. It is not the fact that your degree is in the wrong subject.
Right.
It's not the macroeconomic environment or the interest rates. What is holding you back is simply the lack of focused, consistent action paired with a clear strategy.
It is entirely about taking radical responsibility for the variables you actually control, rather than outsourcing your momentum to the universe.
To summarize the massive mindset shift we've been exploring today from these notes, you really have to move away from the passive, comfortable hope of saying, I just need the right opportunity to come along.
Because it won't.
Right. You have to shift to the active, slightly terrifying declaration of, I will create momentum with small, real work, and I am starting right now. You have to consciously choose the discomfort of starting small, because that discomfort is the literal sensation of entropy being reversed.
It is the exact feeling of the engine finally turning over after sitting dead in the garage for a year.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We talked a lot today about how time and entropy work against your career if you stay still, and how setting proximate objectives can build professional momentum in these 3-week sprints. But think about this concept beyond just your resume.
Oh, this is good.
What if you applied this exact same strategic physics to the rest of your life? I mean, if you can design your career momentum by finding the weak link and clearing the bottleneck, what other stagnant areas of your life are suffering from the bad strategy of waiting for the right time?
That is a fascinating application of the framework.
Right. Think about your physical health, your unfinished creative projects, or maybe your strained relationships. Are you waiting for a sudden burst of motivation to fix them? The physics of momentum and this battle against inertia don't just apply to job hunting, they govern your entire reality.
It's so true.
You cannot just yell at the highway to clear up. So ask yourself, what is the one deeply uncomfortable thing you need to do today to fix the weakest link in your life?
That is the exact question you should be asking yourself the moment this audio ends.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Now stop preparing, get out there, and clear the bottleneck.